AI is reshaping every category of software. We're particularly excited about a new ecosystem of startups that are shaking up some of the most entrenched categories of business-critical software that have often been regarded as impossible to replace. These are the companies that will take us from legacy systems of record to AI systems of action. I'm Mike Droesch, partner at Bessemer Venture Partners.
And I'm Darsh Patel, an investor here at Bessemer. And in this series, we're pulling back the curtain on our internal road mapping process as we speak to founders of the startups making this happen. We're candidly still learning and debating how this market will evolve as we build out our thesis, and we're excited to share that process with you. This is Systems of Action.
Today's guest is Christopher O'Donnell, founder and CEO of Day.ai. He is a veteran product operator and a repeat founder who rose through the ranks at HubSpot over the course of a decade, ending his time there as chief product officer before spending another year leading product for Arianna Huffington's Thrive. He recently jumped back into the startup world, founding Day.ai here in Boston, and we think there are few people who are more qualified to be building an AI native CRM. So we're really excited to talk to him. Christopher, awesome that we can do this in person. Thank you for coming. We're really excited to chat with you today.
Yes, benefit of living right down the road. I used to live just a couple blocks from here for 10 years, but now I'm out in the burbs.
Yeah, I feel you. Well, we're excited to jump into it today. Obviously, you've had an incredible career at some pretty impressive companies so far. So I think we just want to start at the beginning. Tell us a little bit about what prompted you to jump back into a startup and maybe give us some color on the founding story for Day.
So we started the company in May of 23. And it right in that spring period, this was right before ChatGPT came out or right around that time. And it felt like something major was about to drop. Timing is everything in startups. I'm a firm believer in that. It felt like an internet moment and a good time to just start something fresh. And I think that's proven to be true.
You touched on it a little bit, but maybe that begs the question. We're thinking about it all day. You're thinking about it all day as a founder. It's like looking for that next wave to surf. Why now? What makes it possible to disrupt the CRM market today where it wasn't before?
So CRM is sort of what we know, what we do. Thought about doing a million other startup ideas. And I think the venture community took those meetings and nodded and smiled. One of my friends actually in a partner meetings, her notes on us were waiting for Christopher to realize that he has to do CRM. This is a literal fact, somebody that you guys know well. So we did. We realized it was a great time to start a company. It was going to be CRM. And at that time, you could squint and see where things were going, but you couldn't do any of the bread and butter of what we do today. That wasn't possible until about June of 24,
right,
when 3.5 Sonnet came out. And that was when it was really possible. The vision that my co-founder, Mike Peachy, and I have had for years and years and years, he worked on Sales Hub at HubSpot with me. We did a startup within a startup. There's a whole cool story. Stanford's doing a case on it right now with Mark Roberge and Brian Balfour's really, really cool arc that turned into, could be a public company on its own. And in that time, we kept coming back to this idea of the Spotify of sales. This idea that just trying to explain to, I don't know, your parents or family members what Spotify is and that you don't need, they give you a CD for Christmas and you're kind of like, thanks. And you realize you don't own a CD player. I don't know if that's happened to me. So we thought a similar thing was destined to happen and it just wasn't possible. There just wasn't really any way. Like, what are you going to do? You're going to just automatically rewrite all of this raw material into CRM data and then somebody logs in for the first time and everything is there and makes sense and is playlisted and prioritized. But we never really let go of that kind of idea. And when ChatGPT, the very first version of that web app came out, and then 3.5 Turbo API endpoints and so forth, it felt like this was going to be possible. It still wasn't possible, but it felt like the idea of taking raw natural language and turning it into structured data that we could then turn back into unstructured data and sort of chat with and ask questions and have it generate reports. And that whole sort of vague daydream felt pretty real enough for us to go, do a seed financing round and sort of sign up for the whole thing. So yeah, it was an idea that we'd had for a long time that finally felt possible.
Just on the kind of why now, like what's the hardest thing that you feel like you've had to solve in making this a reality at this point?
It has changed. Partially because we've been able to work through some of these things, partially because things that were really hard just totally went away. For example, fine tuning. labeling data, fine-tuning data, being able to read email messages and summarize them in the right way and everything. And we were starting to spin up data labeling contractors and to get the right result and all the rest of it. And then probably like the GPT-4 generation of stuff came along. And then not long after that, the Anthropic stuff. And it was like, we're not going to have to fine tune anything.
It was like a glorious 3 months where it was like, oh, this is labor intensive.
Yeah, exactly. We're fine tuning 3.5 turbo. Everybody was, So some challenges kind of just shifted away. Some challenges we were able to just grind through, generating, for example, the contacts in a CRM. There were some novel things that we were doing that were a little bit nuanced and tricky, and a lot of it was fairly straightforward. Now, if you're going to go generate opportunities, like you see a certain part of a meeting recording and you go, ooh, that's a sales opportunity. Where's that sales pipeline? Oh, over here. What are the stages for it? Reasoning through how we were going to get all of that done was just a product challenge, just a grind. Anybody, by the way, who says they're doing AI native CRM, I just buy them flowers and a big 10-pound bag of coffee. And I just say, absolutely good luck. Absolutely have fun. It's brutal, but it's work. It's product work that you can get through. And then there was a period where you couldn't really get structured data out of these things. So for a while, we were kind of banging our heads against the wall, writing prompts to the LLMs in all caps, pleading with the AI to return type safe JSON and stuff like that. But then that went away as well. Now I think, we've been working toward this fully automatic everything, the Waymo of CRM, like the full self-driving CRM. And we figured the grind would be getting from 50% to 100% on the data. And then we'd be good. And we'd show people the CRM and it would be perfect. And we realized that there's a lot of anxiety now around computed data. Where did it come from? Why is this thing here and not there? How do I override this? And all of that kind of control layer, sort of fingers lightly on the wheel of the Waymo. That's probably the current area of challenge. And again, I think a straightforward, but very hard product challenge.
Our kind of working thesis on all of these AI systems of record is historically the pain to switch from a legacy to a modern system of record has been very high. And the value in switching is questionable. And our thesis, like today, we think actually the cost in switching is going to come down dramatically with the help of AI agents and such. We think the value for the first time will be 10x greater. You'll have the Waymo experience that is truly mind-blowing. We'd love to jump in to the early folks that are using the product. What are those 10x better mind-blowing experiences that they're having with the product today?
And I'll start with the system of record piece. I was talking to one person in the venture community, and this person was talking about how sticky systems of record are. And the example that they used was Zendesk. If all of your support tickets are in Zendesk, you're not really going anywhere. And I'm on the call thinking, how do I tell this guy that we have all of the support tickets? We 100% have all of the support tickets, and we have them deduped, and we have the clips and Slack messages that they came from, and we have them tied to all of the opportunities and can show you the revenue potential impact of a bug. It's a very different world. In terms of the mind-blowing stuff, it's different than what you maybe would think when you start building it. They kind of know what their pipeline is. You show it to them, and it's as hard as it is to generate the whole thing automatically. That isn't necessarily the wow moment, and they'll do the annoying thing and be like, "That's not right." And then a lot of the time, not all the time, sometimes we get it wrong. Sometimes you go, "Well, open it up," and they go, "Oh yeah, that is an opportunity. I just forgot about it." That's not necessarily it. Showing something that would sound very mundane, like to-dos. We call them actions in traditional CRM. It's events or activities, tasks, whatever. That's actually really hard and really magical to the user when you say, hey, here are the 3 things you should start your day with. And they actually are those things. And you're giving them the why so that they can quickly context switch back into it. And then you do fancy stuff like generate a project plan or an email draft. By that point, again, we would expect the magic wow. But by that point, they've wrapped their head around what they're looking at and they expect it. You know what I mean? So it's this funny letdown where the really magical stuff either doesn't make any sense when somebody sees it, or once they're in the mindset that it should work the way that ChatGPT or Claude works, it's the absolute minimum, that anybody would expect. Well, of course I should be able to ask this thing, what all of the deals that have gotten stuck in this stage with this particular rep, what's different about those from these deals that have progressed with this other rep? And the thing comes back with the answer and everything. They're like, yeah, this is pretty good. For sales managers, I think the magic stuff hits the fastest and the best because, what are these things good at? They're really good at synthesis. There's a lot that goes into preparing the context and kind of setting the stage for this. But the idea that you can look at a whole pipeline and basically be like, give me a few smart things to say in a meeting. And it gives you smart things to say in a meeting is really immediately pretty amazing. And we look for expletives in user feedback.
Yeah.
That's very expletive heavy, that lane of feedback. Or earnest questions of, what deal should I help out on? It's hard to sort of wade through tables and, a million tabs open to try to figure out what you're going to work on. And you end up having to do that one by one sales rep pipeline review that, everybody knows and strongly dislikes. So that kind of answer is really magic.
It's amazing how fast our expectations change. This is like when Wi-Fi doesn't work on an airplane. You're used to not be able to get any Wi-Fi, and now if you've got to wait for 10 minutes for it to reload, it's like, arms up in the air.
We're pretty fortunate to know a lot of your customers and the startups that we meet and talk to every day. How is your ICP today a function of your product today, and how does that evolve over time?
Such a good question. Starting a brand new enterprise and thinking about product development and go-to-market, which we really like to think about as two sides of the same coin. That's why I really wanted to start this with Mike. Probably 10 years ago, I said out loud, I'm never doing a product from scratch without this guy. Because he pushes hard on what actually is landing. And I think a lot of companies, you end up with this two-party system between R&D and go-to-market and a lot of kind of signal loss. So this is a huge question, right? And something that we need alignment on from the beginning. One way to start this new enterprise would be to do design partnerships, try to wedge in, that's one way to wedge in, or you could wedge into mass market with a very limited feature set, sort of Y Combinator, classic wedge style. And we didn't want to call up half a dozen friends and get them to give us a, just under the annual budgeting cycle contract line, $229,000 annual development deal for a product that doesn't exist. We didn't want to do that. It's a great way. I mean, if we're having this conversation in business school or something like that, I wouldn't say anything negative about that. We're doing it the hard way, where we're starting from the absolute bottom, starting at 0 employees, and then 1 employee. We view it as levels of a video game and proceeding through them. This level 1 is the solopreneur. Those folks are easy to love. They're, firebrands and interesting. They have quirky businesses. They have big personalities. They have no budget. They don't have some, existential need for CRM, really. Their business is going to be what it's going to be, pretty much, whether they have, the Waymo of CRM or not. Then you get into the teams where it's founders still doing sales. That has been a really interesting slice for us because the founders have a lot of roles. They're doing sales, but they're also doing product development. They're doing support tickets. They're doing marketing. And those, I think, of the whole journey will probably be the hardest people to wow because they're switching functions and switching roles so often. Starting a product from scratch, I mean, you can't ask for anything better. Where we are right now is just, I think, a click up from that, where it's teams that are building out their go-to-market function. So greater than 1 full-time salesperson, under 50 employees, kind of in that area. And, we've been working our way up, assuming it will take years and years and years to then, like it has in the past, the other products that I've worked on, decades to go from, the 50 to 100 kind of bucket to the 500 to 1,000 bucket. And I think this is going to be different. I think it's kind of harder at the beginning and we'll be able to go pretty quickly upstream from there.
It's amazing. Well, maybe as we think about like the profile you're starting with today, growing sales teams, I can imagine they're generally starting greenfield. Like they don't have an existing system. Right. That's got to be a nice, clean entry place. As you think about maybe further into the future, you start moving up market into companies that have some CRM. It's probably not well maintained, but like, how do you think about the potential or the challenges in being able to migrate or pull someone out of their existing system?
Yeah, we were raised right. We were not raised to go try to just do CRM rip outs, out of hubris. I have some respect for a system of record, and also for folks that are happy. I mean, some of these products are a lot better than others. And I obviously have my biases, but there are folks that are very nicely set up, and it's not really a huge value add for them or for us to try to get in and have some big competitive battle kind of thing. Increasingly, people are coming to us and asking the question, they get referred in because they've described what we're doing to somebody that they know. And that person has said, you should get on the phone with these guys. And then we show them. And it's sort of the opposite of what I was just talking about, where you get 20 seconds into the demo and they go, okay, so this is the thing, so you guys are doing the thing. I was wondering if anybody was doing the thing. Okay. Now that's a lot of fun. And if they have an existing solution, there's a big, messy middle here of folks who aren't, on 6 paid products of an existing vendor with an administration team, and everybody's kind of going to the conference and, has the branded backpack and all the rest of that. And they're like, yeah, I'm paying for it, kind of using it. There are a ton of gaps, and you say, well, if it went away, well, okay. So let's talk to those people. There is a massive, massive market of folks there. So that's one thing. Another thing is companies are getting real, I'm sure as you guys run into, AI transformation, board pressure, and in some cases, employee pressure. What are we going to do about this whole thing? In those circumstances, I think that's one of the things that's going to pull us up market faster than we would have expected.
Awesome. So if we're understanding you correctly, it's, don't prefer the rip and replace. The greenfield is where you want to live right now. It's a faster iteration cycle. They can be closer partners to you in the early days, but you're already getting pull from the more brownfield type implementations. And that's somewhere you're going to have to inevitably move.
One way to think of it is, should we be building only for AI native companies? Well, on one hand, that's insane because that's, 0.05% of any existing TAM. On the other hand, at what point is every company that exists an AI native company? At some point it'll be 100%.
It's like building for the cloud 10 years ago.
How do you think about, I'm sure you don't spend too much time on the competition, but how do you think about what you guys are doing relative to any other approaches people are taking and the hard things that you're trying to really differentiate yourselves on?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think the easiest way to illustrate it, and I'm going to date myself here a little bit. 1985 was a huge year. Got a Nintendo home entertainment system, Super Mario Brothers. I was very fortunate. I got Duck Hunt as well. And that 8-bit kind of gaming experience, I think equates pretty well to traditional CRM. It's kind of low resolution, gets the job done. And why is it low resolution? Well, you're compressing the data way down. You are constrained because you are involving the user to source this information. And you are storing it in this pixel art kind of format.
Yep.
A lot of people who have an 8-bit system are building Super Nintendo, or Sega Genesis. They're building the thing where it's going to be Sonic the Hedgehog instead of Mario Brothers. And that will be really fun and cool and impressive. That's not full resolution. And I think that if you have an 8-bit system, the 16-bit system is an incredibly appealing thing to build. You're going to say, all right, well, we have a visual workflow builder. We have all the objects that we need. We can add fields. We can do all this stuff. Great. This is going to be amazing. What we're going to do, we're going to let you go out to the internet and then, do an LLM call with parse data from the internet and populate these fields. Everybody's like, oh my, can we do that? But like PlayStation 5 is completely possible. Like you could build it in a way, theoretically, you could build the system in a way where the native internet is like bound into the data.
Yeah.
And when the internet changes, the summary data in your objects in the CRM updates. That's not science fiction.
Right.
And so it's a radically different way of approaching it. And we're kind of probably at 64-bit. We're probably at 64-bit moving toward ray tracing. It's an enormous volume of data, by the way, and you have to store it in a really interesting way and access it in an interesting way. And you have to store things that are surprising, I think, to people just to kind of meet that consumer grade bar that's being set.
I will say Nintendo 64 was a real breakthrough for people. So hopefully if that's where you guys are today.
We're just trying to get Bond. We're just trying to get Bond done.
GoldenEye.
We're just trying to get GoldenEye done. You know what I mean? Before we move on to Ratchet and Clank, Elden Ring, the Elden Ring of CRM.
That's very multidimensional there.
Yeah, that's our one slide pitch deck is Elden Ring of CRM.
Yeah, there you go.
And maybe we'll just talk about some of the use cases. I know like it's still, you've still got a small group of folks using it, but be curious if you're seeing people use this in a way that is maybe you didn't expect, or people are like developing new behaviors around this tool that's different from how they'd work with a traditional CRM. Because as you point out, like the use cases are very different. You don't need to manage and, feed this the way you had to care for a traditional CRM. So curious if you're seeing any surprising behavior or different behavior.
The goal of this system is to use software less. The best stuff that's happening here is that people are able to be more present in meetings. But to give you a concrete example, like meeting recorders, if you go on g2.com and you read through, I think there are 15,000 verbatims and reviews of the different meeting recording bots that are out there. And these are awesome products. These are absolutely terrific products. And you can look at the feature graphs and all that kind of stuff. People are talking about the experience of being in a meeting as transformative. So it is the lack of software and the lack of taking notes that is the benefit. So that's what we're hearing. We're hearing people going into pipeline reviews or having an answer for their boss. Life experience is better. And I think that's the best benefit that we can give them. It's like, what was the favorite part of your Uber ride? Like, I don't know, getting there. It wasn't being in the car. It was, the ease of the whole thing and the outcome.
It's a great analogy and a great use case for AI actually just making things much more human. Like we actually have to get to have much better, more engaging human experiences from the benefit of all of this technology.
What's the vision here? What does the business look like 10 years from now?
We want to do the whole thing. CRM is 1/3 of the entire enterprise business software space. And we think we have an answer for everything within it. And it's kind of all or nothing. I think it's like going on a fishing trip with your friends, and it's totally healthy to try to catch the biggest fish, totally healthy, and totally paranoid and insane to imagine that your friend is going to catch all the fish in the ocean. This is a way bigger market than anybody thinks. And if you look at any one company going after any other company, even in the best case scenario where both of those companies are wildly successful, it's hard to imagine that they really ate the other's lunch. Right. So I think it can just be a lot of fun and we can have a ton of fun with it. And I'm rooting for my friends too.
Anyone building in the space that you particularly admire, you have to pick one. Doesn't have to be in CRM or systems of record, but broadly next generation AI enabled apps that you think it's doing a really good job.
Yeah. The obvious answer there for me is Cursor. I'm a heavy user of Cursor, and watching what they go through product wise as the models evolve, as their user feedback evolves, as their business model evolves. There are a lot of analogies there. And as I say, I'm using it all day, every day.
Probably a lot of the reason why you're able to stay as low as 8 FTEs today as well, right?
It's the secret weapon that's not so secret, I suppose.
So we're meeting a lot of other founders that are building not just CRM, but other AI native systems of record. And so I'm curious, with all of the difficulties you've gone through, if you have other advice for founders that are trying to take on these really big, audacious categories trying to replace a very entrenched incumbent and trying to build something that's like mission critical for their customers. Any thoughts, things to be wary of, ways to rethink the problem?
This very famous engineer was asked, what's your must-have piece of equipment? And he said, clean rugs and HVAC. Because that's, if you're actually doing the work, that's what you want. You don't want the fancy new knob.
Yeah.
So my answer is a little bit like that, like get the rest of your life together. I think really talking to my family about what this is going to take and, having a friend group in place and having just clarity, doing things in a way that I'm not going to wake up in the middle of the night because I can't afford that. It's 14 hours a day of building with customers, 6 hours of sleep, 4 hours of family. And that's every day. And so there is not a lot of room for error. So sort of honestly, clean rugs and HVAC,
There we go.
stay healthy, don't burn out, get your family unit on board,
Get your affairs in order.
and give me your address and I'll send you that 10-pound bag of coffee.
I love it.
Good. That's
Awesome.
That's great advice and a great note to end on. But Christopher, we really appreciate doing this. We're super excited to see what you guys continue to build today. And yeah, thanks for coming in.
Thanks so much for having me. Congrats on the series.
Thank you. Awesome.
Thanks.